Have you ever felt a strange emptiness in your connections, even when surrounded by people who care? Perhaps you've chased affection, approval, or companionship, only to find it slipping through your fingers like sand. The usual explanation is that you are too picky, too sensitive, or that love simply hasn't found you yet. Society tells you that if you try harder, compromise more, or follow the conventional path, you will finally secure the warmth you seek. But this conventional wisdom is misleading. What Alan Watts teaches us is that there is a deeper reason why love feels elusive once your soul awakens. It is not about failure or being unworthy, or even about bad timing. It is about transformation. When your consciousness begins to awaken, your inner world shifts in ways you cannot always explain, and the old scripts of desire and attachment no longer serve you. The person who once pursued validation now finds it hollow. The pursuits that once felt urgent now appear shallow. Awakening changes the way the soul experiences connection, creating a tension between what others expect from you and the depth you have discovered within yourself. This is not a tragedy, it is a revelation. There is a hidden truth that most never see. Love, in the form we imagine it, often cannot reach a soul that has glimpsed its own essence. And yet in this very paradox lies a kind of freedom, a kind of clarity that can transform your entire life. You begin to see that what felt like absence is actually space. What seemed like rejection is protection, and what looks like solitude is the soil in which your true self can flourish. Before we dive deeper, take a moment and imagine a man who has awakened in this way. He walks through life with quiet eyes, observing without clinging, feeling without fear, yet he is misunderstood by the world around him. People may call him cold, distant, or strange. And here is where the reflection begins. If you subscribe, share, and comment on this video, you're helping to spread this insight, to bring awareness to others who may also feel the gap between their awakened soul and the love they seek. Together, we explore what it means to navigate love after awakening and what truly awaits those who understand this subtle but profound truth. Before awakening, love often feels like a destination you must reach, a prize to be won through effort, charm, or sacrifice. You may have measured yourself by how much attention you received, how many hearts you captured, or how secure you could make someone feel. In those days, desire was a constant companion, and the longing for connection could feel unbearable, driving choices that pleased others while fragmenting your own sense of self. Every smile you sought, every compliment you chased, reinforced a delicate illusion that you were incomplete without another's approval. Life, in this state, moves as a series of transactions, subtle negotiations of affection and attention, leaving the soul perpetually restless. Then awakening begins to shift everything. The eyes that once searched outward now begin to see inward. The illusions of love as ownership, as compensation, as validation start to dissolve. Suddenly the familiar patterns of pursuit feel trivial, even suffocating. The need to impress, to be accepted, to fit the mold of someone else's desire no longer holds sway. In this quiet transformation, love appears differently, not as an external force to grasp, but as a reflection of your own alignment, a resonance with your own awakened presence. It is not that love is gone, it is that your perception has changed. What once felt essential now seems optional, and what once seemed fulfilling now feels superficial. As this shift takes root, the contrast with your previous self becomes stark. Friends, partners, even strangers may notice a difference, though they cannot name it. You may appear aloof, detached, or enigmatic, and some may retreat, unsettled by your depth. Yet beneath this surface you are more whole than ever before. The detachment they perceive is actually a clarity of spirit, a refusal to trade authenticity for comfort. The freedom that comes with awakening allows you to exist without dependency, to engage with life without clinging to outcomes, and to embody a love that is profound, even if it remains largely unseen by the world around you. This transformation is both liberating and isolating. You start to understand that the love you once sought in the eyes of others can now be found within, in the quiet acceptance of your own being. And yet, paradoxically, this self-contained fulfillment can make conventional love more difficult to sustain, because the awakened soul does not settle for illusions. It is here, in this tension between longing and liberation, between appearance and essence, that the path of awakened love truly begins. Awakening begins to unravel the silent agreements that govern most human relationships. You start to notice how much of what you once valued, approval, admiration, the comfort of predictable routines, was built on fragile foundations. Friendships were often transactional, love conditional, and even family bonds subtly controlled by expectation. The awakening mind sees through the conventions that demand you bend, accommodate, and suppress your own truth to maintain harmony. What once seemed normal now feels constrictive, like walking through a room filled with invisible walls that you had been taught to accept without question. This deconstruction does not happen all at once, but in subtle, almost imperceptible shifts. You begin to recognize moments when your actions were guided not by desire or curiosity, but by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. Once these patterns are seen for what they are, they lose their grip. You may continue to participate in relationships, but with a new detachment. No longer dependent, no longer bargaining for affection, no longer tethered to the expectation that someone else's gaze defines your worth. The awakening soul moves with a quiet autonomy, making choices not out of need, but out of resonance with its own inner compass. Others notice this change, and their reactions can be confusing. Some admire your independence from a distance, while others are unsettled, perhaps even resentful, because the old scripts no longer apply. You may appear cold or arrogant, but these perceptions are merely projections. Your essence is grounded, present, and clear. By stepping away from the need to perform, from the subtle manipulations of expectation, you allow your relationships to evolve or dissolve naturally. This does not mean isolation is your goal. It means that only those who resonate with your true self can connect authentically. And in this space, something remarkable occurs. The awakened soul, freed from illusions, begins to see love in its truest form, not as possession, not as dependency, but as an effortless presence. The bonds that remain are deeper, quieter, and more profound. Yet the paradox remains. Because the soul has awakened, it cannot settle for the shallow mimicry of love that once seemed necessary. What seems like loss, the fading of superficial connections, is actually liberation, clearing the way for encounters that are genuine, rare, and transformative. What was once labeled as loneliness now reveals itself as a profound state of receptivity. Where before absence felt like emptiness, the awakened soul discovers silence as a companion, a canvas upon which clarity and self-knowledge are painted. Desire, once frantic and outward-directed, now flows inward, refined and discerning. The restless pursuit of validation gives way to an intuitive understanding of one's own rhythms, needs, and capacities. In this light, what the world calls isolation is, in fact, a sacred alignment with the self, a preparation for love that is not dependent on the fleeting moods or approvals of others. Weakness, too, is reinterpreted. The man who once bent himself to fit expectations, who feared confrontation and avoided solitude, is now mistaken for fragile or distant. But true strength has shifted inward. It is the strength of authenticity, of presence, of clarity. It is the power that does not need applause, that does not demand recognition, and that does not cling. In these moments, you realize that the qualities society equates with masculinity, assertion, dominance, control, are superficial when compared to the quiet resilience of a self-aware soul. The awakened man does not strive to impress. He simply exists with integrity, and in doing so, becomes magnetic in a way that conventional effort could never achieve. Desire itself undergoes a transformation. It is no longer the desperate reaching for someone else's affection, but a recognition of resonance and compatibility. The awakened soul recognizes that love cannot be forced, shaped, or bargained for. It may come, it may not, but the soul's fulfillment is not contingent on its arrival. What seems like unfulfilled longing is now a disciplined attention to the quality and depth of connection, a refusal to dilute one's essence for temporary comfort. This shift makes relationships more meaningful and less frequent, more genuine and less transactional. Yet it may also create the illusion that love is harder to find than ever before. And here lies the paradox that Watts emphasizes. The soul that has awakened may feel separated from love in the conventional sense, but this very awakening is what makes true love possible. What appears as absence is actually preparation. What appears as rejection is protection. What seems like weakness is the cultivation of inner power. You begin to understand that love is not something to be chased, but something that arises in the presence of a soul unbound by illusions, a soul free enough to meet love without compromise. As the awakened soul moves through the world, the tension between appearance and essence becomes increasingly visible. To others, you may seem detached, aloof, even unapproachable. Friends might whisper that you've changed, that you no longer care, that something essential about your warmth has vanished. Colleagues may interpret your clarity and self-possession as arrogance, while potential partners may sense a barrier they cannot name. Yet beneath this surface, nothing is lost. What they perceive as distance is actually a deliberate refusal to surrender authenticity for the sake of approval or convenience. The awakened soul honors its own truth above all else, and in doing so radiates a quiet authority that cannot be manufactured. This tension is not without consequence. Some relationships naturally fade, and invitations once taken for granted are no longer extended. Yet in this shedding lies a kind of liberation, the removal of attachments that were never truly aligned with your evolving self. Where before the soul sought validation through the presence of others, now it finds validation internally. Every interaction is filtered through awareness, every connection measured not by external expectations, but by resonance. And paradoxically, this inner discipline attracts those who are aligned with your essence, those whose presence amplifies rather than diminishes your awakened state. The world's misunderstanding often acts as a mirror, reflecting back the very growth you have undergone. Being labeled strange or cold is not a failure. It is evidence of transformation. You move through life with fewer compromises, fewer distractions, and a deeper appreciation for what is meaningful. In this space, even ordinary experiences, walking through a city street, observing a sunset, or engaging in simple conversation, carry a weight and clarity that was previously inaccessible. The awakening has refined your perception, and with this refinement comes a heightened awareness of both beauty and impermanence. And so the consequences continue to unfold, layer by layer. The man who was once bound by fear, desire, and expectation now navigates life with subtlety and grace. His decisions reflect clarity, his emotions are deliberate, and his connections are authentic. While some may feel alienated by this transformation, it is precisely this very alignment that cultivates a deeper freedom. Love, in its truest form, becomes not a pursuit, but a natural resonance. And though it may seem more distant, it is ultimately more real, more profound, and infinitely more sustaining than the superficial attachments of the past. The consequences of awakening ripple through life in ways that are subtle yet profound, shaping not only perception, but the very rhythm of existence. On the surface, your life may appear quieter, more solitary, as if the world has contracted around you. Invitations that once came freely now arrive less often, and familiar faces seem to drift away without explanation. Even ordinary interactions carry a strange tension, as if people sense a change in you that they cannot name. Yet this external sparsity is deceptive, for within it lies the expansion of your inner world. Every moment of solitude becomes a laboratory for self-awareness, where your thoughts, emotions, and desires can be observed without the distortion of expectation or fear. What appears as absence is in truth a fertile space, a void waiting to be filled not by others' illusions, but by the richness of your own presence. As this inner landscape solidifies, decisions that once felt uncertain now arise with clarity and authority. You no longer navigate life by measuring yourself against others' standards or chasing approval. Each choice is informed by an intimate dialogue with your own essence, a deep knowing of what resonates and what does not. The awakened soul does not react automatically, nor does it yield to impulse or habit. It observes, discerns, and acts with intention. Relationships are experienced differently now. Interactions are no longer transactional. Love cannot be manipulated or hurried, and the connections that endure are those that honor both freedom and authenticity. What may seem like a narrowing of options is actually a refinement, a subtle calibration that aligns your outer life with your inner truth. Even the most ordinary experiences, walking through a crowded street, watching a sunset, hearing a friend's story, carry a new intensity. Where before life was filled with distraction, you now perceive subtle currents, the undercurrent of emotion, the unspoken tension in a room, the resonance of a fleeting smile. Everything feels more vivid, more alive, more charged with meaning. And through this heightened awareness, the nature of love itself transforms. It is no longer a possession, a dependency, or a consolation. It is a resonance that arises spontaneously between souls whose authenticity meets without compromise. It cannot be forced, it cannot be fabricated, and it cannot be claimed by desperation. It is rare, subtle, and infinitely more precious because it emerges only in the presence of awakened clarity. The paradox deepens as you notice how this new perception affects your interactions with the world. Some people may retreat, confused or intimidated by your presence, while others are drawn in, recognizing the gravity of someone who moves through life without need, without pretense, without fear. What the world mistakes for aloofness or strangeness is actually a powerful alignment with your own essence, a quiet authority that does not demand acknowledgement. The awakened man may seem distant, but this distance is the measure of his freedom. It protects the integrity of his being and ensures that love, when it arrives, meets him on the same plane of truth. And finally, this evolution is cumulative. The small shifts of perception, moments of stillness, clarity, and discernment aggregate into profound transformation. The soul that once chased affection now walks with a measured serenity, understanding that love cannot be coerced and that connection cannot exist without resonance. Life, once a frantic dance of need and desire, now unfolds as a deliberate choreography, where each step reflects conscious choice, each pause reflects introspection, and each encounter carries the potential for genuine connection. The awakening has not taken away love. It has refined it, preparing the soul to recognize and honor love in its most authentic and enduring form, a love that is no longer bound by illusion, expectation, or compromise. And so, what once seemed like isolation is revealed to be clarity. What appeared as weakness is, in truth, immense power. What felt like loss is actually liberation. The awakened soul stands not as a figure diminished by solitude, but as a being expanded by insight, fully aligned with the rhythm of existence. Love in the conventional sense may still appear elusive, yet this very elusiveness is a reflection of the depth that has been attained, a depth that ordinary attachments could never reach. The paradox is complete. By stepping away from illusion, by letting go of the desperate chase, the soul becomes more capable of giving and receiving love that is genuine, profound, and enduring. The man who walks this path is not rejected, nor is he incomplete. He has traded shallow echoes of affection for the authentic resonance of self-awareness. Relationships may be fewer, encounters rarer, but each is enriched with meaning and clarity. The cost of awakening is measured not in absence, but in the refinement of perception, the cultivation of inner power, and the freedom to engage with life and love on terms dictated by truth rather than expectation. In this way, the awakened soul experiences a kind of intimacy and connection that transcends the ordinary, a love that is as much about presence and alignment as it is about companionship. If you have felt the tension between longing and liberation, if you have struggled with the sense that love eludes you because your awareness has deepened, know that this is not a loss, but a preparation. The awakening has rendered you ready for love that matches your depth. Your clarity, your discernment, your self-possession, all are not barriers but gateways to connections that truly resonate. By embracing this paradox, you step fully into the life that awaits, a life of authenticity, freedom, and profound, unforced love. If this reflection resonates with you, consider subscribing to continue exploring these insights, sharing this video with someone who may need to hear it, and commenting with your own experiences or thoughts. Every reflection, every shared story enriches this community, turning individual awakening into a shared journey. Together, we discover that love is never lost. It is transformed, elevated, and infinitely more meaningful when it is met with an awakened soul.